Hey, Picasso, keep the paint inside the lines. This is a Marine recon unit, not a kindergarten art class. The gunny's voice, sharp and serrated, cut through the air, but the woman painting just kept her steady, silent rhythm. The California sun beat down on the tarmac of Camp Pendleton, a relentless hammer forging the heat into a shimmering mirage that distorted the distant, brown hills. In the middle of this vast expanse of concrete and controlled aggression, the woman, Elena Volkov, seemed to exist in her own pocket of cool, professional detachment. Her world was precisely the size of the enormous steel hangar door in front of her, her focus absolute, a pinpoint of light in the overwhelming glare. Her brush, an extension of her will, moved with a slow, deliberate grace that was almost hypnotic. It laid a perfect, unwavering line of desert tan paint along the doorframe, each stroke a testament to an economy of motion that bordered on art. She was a study in quiet competence, an island of profound calm in an ocean of raw, unfiltered testosterone. The voice that had sliced through her concentration belonged to Gunnery Sergeant Rex Corbin, known universally and with a mixture of fear and reverence as Gunny. He was a monument to the Marine Corps ethos, built like a concrete pylon with a barrel chest and a voice that had been sandblasted by 2 decades of shouting over engine roar and the crack of live fire. To him, the woman was an obstacle, a civilian nuisance polluting his sacred space of warrior making. He saw a painter, nothing more. He saw a nondescript gray jumpsuit, hands that looked too steady to be anything but soft, and an infuriating, placid lack of deference to the spectacle of his authority. He thrived on reactions, on seeing his power reflected in the eyes of others, and her placid indifference was a personal affront. "Look here, trainees," he bellowed, gesturing with a contemptuous flick of his hand toward Elena. The crowd of young recon candidates, lean and hungry in their digital camouflage fatigues, offered a chorus of nervous chuckles. A few, eager to curry favor, smirked openly. Others shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting away, embarrassed by the display, but too intimidated to defy their instructor. This is what happens when you lose focus. When you can't hack it, you wash out. You end up painting doors for a living. No intensity, no purpose, just beige. He was performing, using her as a prop in his daily lesson on martial superiority, on the rigid, unforgiving hierarchy of the world as he saw it. In his world, there were predators and there was prey. There were warriors and there were the people who painted their walls. Her silence was, to him, a clear admission of inferiority. It was the silence of the unimportant, the background characters and the grand, explosive drama of his recon unit. He failed to see the truth because he wasn't looking for it. He failed to see that her silence wasn't empty. It was full. It was dense with a discipline he couldn't possibly comprehend, an intensity forged in pressures he had never known. Her hands, which he dismissed as soft, were the hands of a surgeon, practiced in tasks where a tremor of a single millimeter meant the difference between clean success and catastrophic, irreversible failure. Her calm was not passivity. It was control, a mastery over self so complete that the loud, blustering world of men like Gunny Corbin simply ceased to register as a threat. It was merely noise, and she was an expert at filtering noise from signal. From the shaded balcony of the command tower, overlooking the sprawling training grounds, General Madsen watched the entire exchange through a pair of gyrostabilized binoculars. He wasn't focused on the gunny's familiar theatrics or his students. His attention was fixed with a growing sense of puzzlement on the woman. He saw the methodical calm, the almost inhuman economy of her movement. No wasted steps, no hesitation, no superfluous gestures. And then he saw it. As she turned to dip her brush into the can, her wrist rotated into the harsh sunlight, revealing for a fraction of a second a flash of dark ink against her pale skin. It wasn't a blur, it was a shape. Precise, deliberate. The general froze, his knuckles turning white on the cool metal railing. He slowly lowered the binoculars, his face a mask of utter disbelief. It couldn't be. Not here. Not like this. The moment of reckoning arrived, not with a bang, but with a panicked whisper crackling over the comms network, a thread of genuine fear weaving through the usual clipped jargon. The day's primary exercise, a complex amphibious assault simulation against a full-scale metal mock-up of a hostile freighter, ground to a sickening halt. A training device, a next-generation prototype codenamed Scorpion, had malfunctioned. It was a marvel of engineering. A smart mine with an advanced sensor suite, a hyper-realistic timer, and a powerful magnetic clamp designed to attach to enemy hulls with unshakable tenacity. It had performed the last part of its function too well. It was now fused to the steel hull of the landing craft, its own systems locked in a fatal, paradoxical loop. Its digital countdown was frozen at a terrifying 17 seconds, and the emergency release protocol, a dozen redundant safeties, was failing. It was a dead stick, inert, but its failure was critical. The multi-million-dollar exercise was paralyzed. The trainees of Recon Team Alpha, paragons of physical prowess, were stumped, reduced to spectators. A team of flustered civilian engineers, the device's own designers, were talking in frantic, overlapping circles, their ruggedized tablets and diagnostic tools proving useless against the silent, stubborn machine. "Did you run the L3 diagnostic?" one shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. "The board is fried, I'm telling you. It's not responding to any queries." Another shot back, his voice high with panic. They suggested brute force with a cutting torch, then a complete power down of a landing craft that would take hours and scrub the entire day's invaluable training schedule. Gunny Corbin's face, usually a mask of granite confidence, soured into a grimace of pure frustration. His perfectly orchestrated theater of controlled chaos had descended into a genuine, embarrassing mess. His authority, so absolute moments before, was visibly cracking under the strain of a real, unsolved problem. He barked orders that had no effect, his frustration mounting with every passing second of inaction. The engineers bickered, the trainees shuffled nervously, and the Scorpion clung to the hull, a silent, million-dollar monument to their collective failure. From across the yard, 100 feet away, Elena Volkov calmly placed her paintbrush across the top of the paint can, aligning it perfectly with the can's label. She wiped her hands on a clean rag, her movements unhurried, methodical, almost serene. Each action was deliberate, a single, clear note in a symphony of practiced efficiency that stood in stark contrast to the rising tide of chaos near the landing craft. She began walking toward the source of the commotion, her soft-soled boots making no sound on the hot asphalt. She was moving into the epicenter of the failure, a zone of rising panic and crumbling egos. Yet she carried with her an aura of absolute, unshakable peace. The frantic energy of the scene, the shouting and the nervous tension, seemed to part before her, like water cleaving around the bow of a silent ship. The engineers, deep in their argument, didn't even notice her. The trainees, however, did. Their eyes followed this unassuming woman as she moved with a purpose that defied her station. "Stay back, ma'am. This is a restricted area. A technical problem." Corbin barked as she approached. His voice was tight, his authority already shredded, and her calm presence felt like another indictment of his own failure to control the situation. He saw her approach as a morbid intrusion, another civilian gawker getting in the way. He moved to block her path, planting his feet, a human wall of frustration and ego. "We have this under control." She didn't respond. She didn't even look at him. Her eyes, a startlingly clear shade of gray, were fixed on the inert device clinging to the steel hull. Her focus was so intense, so complete, that Corbin's formidable presence seemed to dissolve, to become irrelevant. The trainees, witnessing this silent, inexplicable challenge to their seemingly invincible instructor, parted before her. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was an instinctual, silent wave of confused respect for her sheer, unadorned audacity. She walked past the gunny as if he were a ghost, her silence a far more powerful rebuke than any words could have been. She knelt beside the landing craft, her gaze tracing the seams of the Scorpion's casing. Her hands, the ones Corbin had mocked as soft, hovered over the surface, not touching but sensing, reading the machine with a proximity and intimacy that made the engineers with their schematics look like fumbling amateurs. The engineers finally fell silent, watching her bewildered. They had schematics, terabytes of data, and advanced diagnostic tools. She had only her eyes and an unnerving, almost supernatural calm. And in that calm, she saw what they had all missed. It wasn't a software glitch or a power failure. It was a physical flaw, elegant in its simplicity. A hairline stress fracture near the magnetic actuator housing. Invisible to the untrained eye, a tiny imperfection created by the G-force shock of the initial deployment. It was a 1 in a million manufacturing defect, a tiny misalignment causing the actuator to jam in a state of permanent magnetic cohesion. She pointed a single, steady finger, the nail clean and neatly trimmed. "There," she said. It was her first word of the day, quiet but carrying the clarity of a diamond in the cacophony of their panic. Then, she reached into a pocket of her jumpsuit and produced a thin black rod. It looked like a simple tool, a non-conductive pry bar. To the engineers, it was a primitive piece of plastic. It was, in fact, a carbon fiber spudger, a specialized tool for working with delicate electronics, designed to pry and probe without conducting electricity or scratching sensitive components. She didn't pry. She didn't scrape. She held it like a conductor's baton, and with an artist's touch, she tapped a specific point on the casing. Once, twice, a third time. The taps were not forceful, but precise, rhythmic, a calculated application of harmonic vibration designed to resonate through the casing and momentarily disrupt the stiction of the jammed actuator. It was physics as poetry. A sharp click, clean and final, echoed in the sudden, deafening silence that had fallen over the tarmac. The red digital timer on the device, frozen for so long at 17 seconds, went dark. The magnetic clamp, its power source finally interrupted, released with a soft sigh of depressurizing pneumatics. The Scorpion mind slid from the hull and into the waiting, trembling hands of a stunned trainee. The entire crisis, which had stumped a team of specialists and paralyzed an elite recon unit, was over in less than 5 seconds. Gunny Corbin could only whisper, his voice a dry rasp of disbelief. "That's not possible." Into that stunned, echoing silence walked General Madsen. He moved with the quiet, deliberate purpose of a man who owned every inch of the ground he stood on. His boots made a steady, rhythmic sound on the asphalt, a sound that drew every eye. He didn't look at the now-safe device, at the relieved trainees, or at the utterly embarrassed engineers. He walked directly to the woman who was already turning, her task completed, to go back to her painting. "Ma'am," he said, and the word, spoken with his 2-star authority, landed like a thunderclap. A general does not call a contract "painter, ma'am," with that tone of profound respect. Gunny Corbin snapped to a rigid, reflexive attention, his face a canvas of escalating confusion and dawning, gut-wrenching horror. The general gestured to her wrist, to the symbol that was now clearly visible in the bright sun. It wasn't a whimsical tattoo. It was a stark, precise emblem inked into her skin with the precision of a blueprint. A stylized Spartan helmet, its fierce, classical profile overlapping a complex electronic circuit diagram. Beneath it, a single star call sign, Oracle. "I haven't seen that insignia since Operation Crimson Sand." The general's voice was low, laced with a reverence that silenced the entire compound. He was no longer speaking to her, but to the audience of stunned Marines. It was the designation for the mission's lead EOD tech, the one they sent in alone, deep into a tunnel network, when that dirty bomb went critical in Kandahar. The one they called the surgeon. He locked eyes with Corbin, a cold, instructive fire in his gaze. You assumed she was a painter because she was holding a paintbrush. You assumed she was weak because she was a woman. You assumed she was insignificant because she was silent. You saw the surface, Gunny, and you failed the test. The general turned his address to the wide-eyed trainees of Recon Team Alpha, his voice becoming a tool of instruction, Each word a carefully shaped lesson that would be seared into their minds forever. "This," he said, gesturing not to the woman but to the space she occupied, to the aura of competence that surrounded her, "is Master Technician Elena Volkov. Her official title is Civilian Advisor to Naval Ordnance Development, but that title is a placeholder for a reality none of you have the clearance to read." The air grew thick with the weight of the reveal. The unseen file on Elena Volkov might as well have been projected in the air above them. Unit designation: Navy Explosive Ordnance Disposal, Deep Insertion Special Operations. Field specialty: Improvised Nuclear and Chemical Device Disablement. Medals and commendations: the Navy Cross for actions during a mission whose details will never be declassified. A Presidential Unit Citation. 2 Bronze Stars with Valor. She wasn't just a veteran. She was a legend. A ghost who walked out of the deepest, most dangerous situations where even elite recon Marines were not qualified to go. She was on this base incognito, personally observing the field trials of the very device she had helped design, evaluating its performance under real-world stress. General Madsen turned back to Volkov. In front of Corbin, in front of the trainees, in front of the world, the 2-star general, a man who commanded divisions, raised his hand in a slow, perfect salute. It wasn't a gesture of protocol. It was an act of profound, personal respect from one warrior to another. Elena Volkov simply gave a slight, acknowledging nod. The gesture was all the confirmation anyone needed. The story of the painter and the spudger did not just spread, it detonated. It moved through the barracks like a shockwave, from the mess halls of Pendleton to the secure, encrypted forums of the Special Operations community. It became a legend, whispered with a mixture of awe and cautionary fear. It was called the Oracle's Tap, or more colloquially, getting painted. A new piece of institutional slang for being spectacularly and publicly humbled by a foolish assumption. Gunny Corbin did not try to hide or deflect. The arrogance had been surgically excised from him, leaving a hollow space where a new lesson could grow. The next morning, he found Elena Volkov by the same hangar door, applying a second coat of beige with the same infuriating, magnificent calm. He stood a respectful distance away, waiting until she finished her stroke and placed the brush down. There was no bluster left in him, no swagger. He was hollowed out, stripped down to his foundations, and ready to be rebuilt. "Ma'am," he said, his voice quiet, stripped of its usual parade ground bravado. It was the voice of a man who had been fundamentally changed. "Thank you." It was not an apology, but an admission, a recognition of a truth larger than his own ego. He then took a breath, swallowing the last of his pride. "I was wrong, and I would be honored if you would be willing to speak to my trainees. Not about ordnance," he clarified, but about focus, about seeing what is truly there, about the nature of silent professionalism. She paused her work, turning to look at him, truly look at him, for the first time. Her gray eyes were not triumphant or judgmental. They were simply clear, like deep water. She held his gaze for a long moment, then gave a single, clean nod. Her lesson was not a lecture. It was a demonstration. She didn't stand at a podium or use a PowerPoint. She brought the trainees to the freshly painted wall, the very scene of their instructor's humiliation. She had them each field strip their service rifles onto clean cloths on the tarmac. "Gunny Corbin teaches you how to fire this weapon," she began, her voice soft yet carrying an absolute authority that commanded more attention than Corbin's loudest shouts. She picked up a rifle's lower receiver, her movements fluid and sure. "I teach you to understand it, to know the lock, the trigger assembly, the gas system, to know it so well that you can feel a flaw in the metal before it fails." She pointed with the tip of her spudger to a tiny pin. "He teaches you to use a battering ram to breach a door. I teach you that if you understand the lock, the hinges, the frame, the entire system, you don't need the ram. You only need a tap." A young Marine, bolder than the rest, asked, "But ma'am, how do we learn to see that?" Elena looked at him. "You stop looking for what you expect to see," she said simply, "and you start seeing what is actually there. It begins with silence. Your own." The lesson was profound. It was about competence over brute force, intellect over aggression, perception over projection. Later, inside the EOD Training Facility's Hall of Honor, the humble carbon fiber spudger was mounted inside a small, climate-controlled glass case. It was placed not with the trophies of war, captured enemy flags, and decommissioned weapons, but with the tools of learning. The small brass plaque beneath it did not bear her name. It read, "The right tool is knowledge. The right touch is experience. The right assumption is no assumption at all." A year later, the culture at the Marine Corps Reconnaissance Training Company had subtly but profoundly shifted. The legend of the painter was now standard issue for every new class arriving at Pendleton. It was the first story they heard, a parable delivered with solemn gravity by Gunny Corbin himself, whose instructional style was now transformed. He still demanded grueling physical excellence, but he now championed intellectual rigor and situational humility with even greater fervor. He designed new exercises, simulations that rewarded the team that found the quietest, most elegant solution, not the most explosive one. He taught his Marines to look for the quiet professional in the room, to respect the unassuming, to understand that the most dangerous person in a conflict is often the one nobody notices. The failure rate in the diagnostic and problem-solving phases of their training dropped by nearly 40%. Elena Volkov's unofficial lesson had been formalized into a training module that emphasized cognitive finesse. Her presence on the base became a living symbol of this new philosophy. She would still be seen sometimes in her gray jumpsuit, observing equipment trials, her silence a powerful, living reminder that true strength doesn't need to announce itself. Her legacy wasn't in a single act of impossible skill. It was in the enduring change she inspired, a ripple effect of competence that made warriors not just stronger, but wiser. True legacy is never a static monument. It isn't a medal pinned to a uniform or a name carved in stone. It is a living principle, a standard of excellence that is passed on, refined, and carried forward by those who come after. Elena Volkov's legacy wasn't just in the deactivation of a single device. It was in the activation of a new mindset in a generation of elite warriors. It was in the quiet confidence she modeled, the idea that worth is proven through action, not assertion. It was in the respect she commanded without ever demanding it. Her story serves as a permanent lesson that assumptions are the enemy of awareness, and ego is the enemy of expertise. The world is built, maintained, and protected not by the loudest voices in the room, but by the steady hands and calm minds of the quiet professionals, the surgeons and the painters. The ones who understand the intricate mechanics of reality and have no time for the theater of arrogance. They are the hidden architects of our safety, content to be judged only by the silent perfection of their work. This story shows that prejudice is the greatest enemy of perception. If you also believe that true respect is earned through action, not demanded by rank, please type "respect is earned" in the comments below. Let's honor the quiet heroes who protect our world in silence. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that will shake your perspective. And please, always comment with respect for everyone in our community.